want to welcome Dr. Randy James from True Life Medicine and just to give us a background of your practice and what you do and your heart behind doing functional medicine.
Yeah, Melanie, thank you, first of all, for inviting me. And well, I am a parent of three teens, so we're right in the thick of that. And they are 19 and 17 and 14. And down the functional medicine pathway, they're always a part of that story where, how did I go from regular family practice and I was in the military. I had the military scholarship, so they paid for school. And I was always interested in functional medicine through the lens of my dad, who is also a physician. And I was his worst patient. So for me to get well, he was trying to think differently outside the box. That was back in the 80s and 90s. But by then, I'm already into medical training. As I'm now in practice, I had to kind of color by numbers, so to speak, and be a part of the system. And that was in the military, and that was fine. We wanted to travel, and so we had a great time in the military for 10 years. My firstborn was born actually in Germany, and then when we got out, landed in Colorado, and that was '07. And around 7, 8, 9 is where one son kind of sailed off the cliff. So this was the pediatric years, and he turned from my normal kid to what commonly would be called raging ADHD in the space of what felt like a few weeks.
Wow.
So at that point in time, I'm learning about functional medicine, and then I remember telling Marcy, my wife, okay, we really have to figure this out. This has to be a priority. And so we got him kind of back on track, and it worked really well. And then my third son, when he was about 4 or 5, so about 3 or 4 years later, he kind of went down the pathway of an autoimmune situation. So there again, we really have to try and figure these things out. So that was 10 or 15 years ago. And since then, kind of evolved out of regular insurance-based primary care and through several iterations of trying to help other people as they also recognize something's not quite right here. How do we think outside the box? What does that mean?
Yeah. I love the fact that you went from military to regular practice and now you're doing functional medicine. So it gives you a broad perspective of the medical health care.
Well, yeah, and I hate it when people sort of bash the military medicine. Military medicine is the quintessential delivery of the Western medical model, right? Like it is built on acute care or acute infection. How do you get this person back to the front lines? And so the system works really well if there's a bullet wound or an infection. But just think about the VA. When these guys get out and they're in their, post 20-year career, everybody knows that they come out of the system not well. And now you're in the VA where now you've got multiple chronic issues, but you're still using that same philosophy to, instead of patching a bullet wound, you're sort of patching up hypertension, which means a medicine every day.
Yeah.
Or the children of these people, and it's, ADHD equals Ritalin. So it's the same. And it's not that that's always wrong, right, but there is a different way to think about that, to think outside the box that, in my opinion, is a better way. And it gives people a bigger sense of captaincy, of agency, which, by the way, as we're talking about teens, is what I would say is the biggest reason why they don't love me. is because a lot of times they're not ready for captaincy or agency.
Right.
But as you know, if you're the mom of a 15-year-old, you can lead a horse to water.
Yeah.
But if they're not really in it, then it's just more nagging mom or pestering dad. And I'm in it. I mean, I have got kids with pathology, and it's delicate, right? Like we talk about it all the time. Well, it's different. There's a big difference between a 19-year-old and a 14-year-old. And probably my 14-year-old is the stickiest puzzle. If he's a metabolic, puzzle,
Okay.
the 19 and 17-year-old are, they're doing pretty well. And we joke about it where, and it was just recently, Melanie, I think it was maybe even spring break. So a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so he told me of his own accord. I wasn't pestering him. And he's a freshman at Colorado State. And he's like, yeah, I'm really trying hard to make sure I get vegetables at every meal. And on the inside, I'm like, oh, and then I'm telling myself, okay, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. Just
Right.
let him be on his own journey and think about it. And the 17-year-old who's a junior, and he said just the other day, it was post Easter, and it was funny because my wife is the Easter bunny. So I'm like, why do we do that? And she was saying, are you going to leave your Easter stuff on the kitchen table for, how long? And she's like, why don't you just eat that stuff? And I look at him and I kind of shake my head or don't.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying, I'm trying to limit it. I'm trying to make it last a long time. I'm like, okay, good job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the 14-year-old said, well, mine's already gone.
Yep, that sounds about right. The third child. Yeah,
That,
yeah. I know you do a holistic approach, which mind, body, life, everything. I would just be curious what you're seeing families with teens struggling the most. Like, is it the communication? Is it getting them to think about their health? Is it mental health? Is it, where are you seeing the most? I mean, I guess when people come to you, what are they saying is their struggle with
yep,
their teens?
that's a great question. And especially down the teenage pathway, quite honestly, there has to be some degree of severity before they wind up in
Mm.
my office. Mostly, I think because we live in a culture that is teaching parents, and we can cut right to the chase. The most common reason would be female, would be hormonal, would be menstrual issues, uh, often associated along with GI pain. And then after that, maybe head something, whether it's on the anxiety side, the depression side, or ADD, ADHD, brain fog. So what we're seeing most often, numbers wise, and also teenage guys, like they're they don't want to go to the doctor. They
Mm-mm.
don't think they're all that bad. They just perceive it as normal, or they're on the sports side, right? Like
Yeah.
if they're
Mhm.
perceiving something is going on where the level of athleticism that they want to have and show is lower, and they can perceive that, then they're willing to do something about it. And on the female side, down the hormone menstrual cycle kind of issue where we ask every woman, older women as well, and thinking back when you were in the teenage years, what was the start of the menstrual cycle, and was there irregularity, was there crampiness, is there PMS, is there any kind of is there heavy cycles? And I always ask, I'll ask you, what percentage of young women, if I ask that question, what percentage will say yes?
Ooh, maybe like 10 at the most.
So wait, I'm going to restate that back to you. So you're saying 10% of, let's say, high school aged women are
Yeah.
reporting menstrual cramping or
Oh no,
PMS.
like 90%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying how many don't present with
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things? Right. So yeah, well, and I would say even maybe more than 90%. It's the rarity for somebody to say, nope, I don't hardly think about it. It's just
Wow.
there. And so we've taught young women that this is normal. And I would say we, as in the docs and the parents, because usually the parents have gone through it as well.
Mhm.
And so the first medicine usually comes from mom, and it's Motrin. And then
Right.
Motrin becomes Midol, and then Midol becomes a birth control. A
Mm.
significant percentage of women, 16 to 18, high school, and they're taking it. And to be honest with you, if I'm asking them and they're that age, half the time they don't know why they're taking it,
Oh wow.
which really bothers my wife. And she works at a crisis pregnancy center, and just
Mhm.
the interplay of the commonality of birth control, whether for acne or for menstrual irregularities or whatever. And so that certainly has an impact on people's psyche.
Mm.
There's also now, so if you go to sort of women these days that are in that 23 to 30-year-old range, so now they've been on birth control 10 to 15 years sometimes.
Mm.
And there's what, if you Google around on, the pill or birth control trauma, so that biochemistry is doing something. So anyway, I do think that for women, it's down that particular pathway. Secondly, the GI kind of things that happen commonly with, again, what 15-year-old woman talks about gas or bloatiness, or what mom asks their 15 to 17-year, how are your bowel movements recently?
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't get brought up until it's pretty significant. And
That's
then
true.
once it's significant, well, now as a male, I'm now speaking with a young woman, and I'm asking these questions, and mom may or may not be present. One of my favorite stories is, I think she was maybe 14 or so, and I asked her, so do you feel like constipation's a piece? And she kind of said, well, yeah. I'm like, well, how often? And I always kind of take the sword off the table because they don't know what normal is.
Right.
Do you go once a day or every other day, or do you go to the bathroom once a week? And she was kind of like, yeah, maybe once a week. And her mom went crazy with, once a week. What do you mean? And I just tell that story to iterate, nobody talks about this over the dinner table. And I don't know that I would ever be on a podcast and say, hey, everybody out there with teenagers, let's
Have that conversation for dinner. No.
let's have the dinner time poop talk. And no, but it just is reflective of our culture.
Yeah.
It's not talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're in a well-meaning, industrious family, and you're teaching responsibility and don't complain and all of that,
Yeah.
they learn to cope.
Yeah.
And they perceive it as normal, and half the time their friends are saying, oh yeah, me too.
Mm.
So it just becomes stuck.
How
And
much
then,
of that do you think is stress based?
yeah, great question. Yes.
A piece of it is a
Yes,
yes.
some of it. And in that mind-body connection, the cortisol response, cortisol is a hormone. And the
Yeah.
dietary component, insulin is a hormone. And the sleep component, or lack of sleep component. So all of those they interplay. And by the way, I don't know if we ever talked about it, but Marcy does most of the work, but we teach the sex ed at the high school. Did I tell you that?
No, I didn't know that.
Up here at the public high school, 9th grade is the year for sex ed. And of course,
Okay.
no biology teacher or PE teacher wants that responsibility. So Marcy actually wrote most of the curriculum, and we
Oh,
try to make it, interesting and fun and whatever. But I always mention, we're going through the menstrual cycle. They don't know. Like, the guys don't know a thing about it. Like, that's, I guess, to be expected.
yeah.
But half the girls barely know. And then, but we always mention, if you're having these kind of things, it's not normal. Like, don't call it normal. And what are the most likely contributing factors? And it's those things. I would say number one is all three of these I'd say is number one, and that is, what is your nutritional pathway?
Mm.
And mostly it's not all that great. How's your sleep? And
Mm.
again, mostly not all that great. And how's your stress response? How are you perceiving? Because life is stress.
Mm-hmm.
We've subtly taught them that stress is bad. I'm worried a bit about Gen Z and Gen Alpha, these ones that are in there right now, that there seems to be a theme that if something is hard, it's not good.
Yeah.
And the amount of stress perception that would then kind of breed seems to be like it would be high. And if that's the case, well, then we should see increasing signs of anxiety and depression and suicidality and those kind of things, and we certainly do.
Wow. Yeah. Um, I would, yeah, I would agree with all of that. In saying that, what practices do you recommend, like for, take care of those things and stress and mental health? What are your top recommendations for a parent?
Well, looking at my own kids, well, the number, um, I think, first of all, from that parent perspective, and now we're getting into, parenting, and that is what parenting is you are
Yeah.
responsible for this kid's, at least in part, for their
Mhm.
biochemistry and their nutrition and their how's their sleep patterns going and what's going on with screens and all of those kind of things. So I do think those loom the largest, probably threaded together with communication. Open the communication doors. Gosh, I'm looking at my notebook right there, and even this morning just kind of jotting down some ideas of how does one lean into, and for me, the 14-year-old, he's going to be the toughest, in his unique personality.
Mhm.
And I don't know, right? Like, he's different. So it's keeping that communication open. And I think he is really one of the ones, like I even wrote down, like, makes me want to clamp. Like, this will be your nutrition. This will be the bedtime. I will control your phone. And right at the time when I'm supposed to be letting loose, right? Like that
Mhm.
open funnel, I'm having these tendencies to want to clamp. So down that pathway to, your listeners, and I would encouraging not doing that. Of course, not letting it be a free for all. There's somewhere in between. That is the middle that I think would be most dependent upon communication.
Mm.
And then, if somebody is ready, if a young one is ready to do something, then I'd probably put bedtime rhythm and screens high up. Like, if you can get buy-in. So we did get pretty good buy-in with the kids. There's no phone in the rooms. You put your phone to bed at a certain time. I think that one is very valuable.
Mhm.
Once they hit high school and they're driving, I really loosened up on the whole nutrition thing and said, look, I can't police you out there, so that's kind of on you. And then down the mental health pathway, well, exercise. Like, our family has been kind of built around sports, so that was always kind of built in and baked in, although my third one is less down that pathway. So for families that don't have that natural outlet, I can see how that would be just a big challenge. If it's not there, that's going to have an impact.
Yeah.
And where we kind of naturally go, if there is, okay, there's more down that mental health pathway, that this person now they're clicking over into depression, anxiety,
Mhm.
ADD, ADHD, insomnia, can't sleep, can't stay asleep, then that's kind of where we really lean into what you are doing and thinking about, well, what does a brain map look like?
Mhm.
And down our pathway, by the way, so if there's any brain symptom, we almost always would get a baseline brain map. And that's going to be, we also get a baseline lab, and we get a baseline, question, where are all those things? So that just then kind of fits in there.
Mhm.
And if the brain map is particularly indicative of XYZ, well, then that can give you, more weight down particular therapeutic options.
Let's give our audience a little education on the brain map, since we're talking about it. So when you recommend a brain map, it's a neurofeedback QEEG baseline, basically is what that is.
Yep.
And when you get the results back, I would be curious what you have seen, like kind of commonality things. I know my experience was life changing, and that's why I'm so passionate about doing a Q map. Is I found out that I had so much inflammation due to food allergies that I didn't know. And so I had to get that out of my system. The only way I did was going to a functional medicine doctor. like you, where all the genes, all the blood work, like, were tested, and I was almost celiac, and I didn't know that that was a huge piece of why my brain wasn't working.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm curious too on the doctor side of sending your patient for a QMAP and then getting it back. What have you seen?
Where do we So, Melanie, this also, we dance this dance with every patient all the time.
Yeah.
And down my lens, where there is an emphasis, or I would say a brain stance, a mindset that we're approaching it from a primary care or a holistic primary care kind of standpoint.
Hmm.
And granted, if somebody comes in and it's not primary care anymore, it's we're already suicidal, we're already failing our grades, we're already, there's diagnoses that are already there. So that would be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Where, there's symptomatology there that needs addressing kind of right now. So
Hmm.
and maybe that's kind of where your pathway was over there. There was enough symptoms to say, okay, we got to figure this thing out. I think it's a bigger mystery over here when it's a sports physical and somebody says, yeah, maybe I'm feeling a little bit anxious, maybe I'm a little distracted, maybe it's hard to fall asleep at night, like, and that is when you talk to a specialist like you, when you talk to people in the neurofeedback world, and I'm not saying you're trying, a hammer only sees a nail and all that kind of thing,
Yeah.
but that's where we're in agreement. I think just like a blood pressure, everybody would do good with a baseline Q.
Yeah.
And maybe had you done a baseline Q a year earlier, 5, 10, 15, like at what point would that have kind of clued you into something else might be going on here? And maybe your story would have been a little bit different,
Hmm.
a little bit less pathology or whatever. And again, I'm walking that right now. Did I tell you that we had run all of our whole family through doing brain maps?
No.
I can't remember when we last had our conversation. So
Yeah.
I was very normal, or no, average. Let's just say average, not normal.
Average. Yeah. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
very average.
Yeah.
And then my first son, second son were pretty average. So our surprises were my wife. And then Sagan, my last one, the 14-year-old. And sure enough, he's quirky, creative, all the kinds of things that you would think is, different. And when we were interpreting the map, and of course, this was with one of the neurofeedback guys, and he's like, you know, so and I'm saying my son does not have any symptoms. Like there's no behavioral, he's makes straight A's, there's no behavioral problems. I mean, granted, he's only in 8th grade, but middle school is lots of burgeoning of those kinds of problems,
Yeah.
and there's nothing that's there. But I see maybe some early signs or whatever. So through their perspective, they were like, if this brain map came in and was attached to a symptom, we would aggressively recommend treatment. So neurofeedback.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's really expensive, and he has no symptoms. So what does one do? So I think this was a little bit kind of new because we don't have a society of doing primary care brain maps as baselines.
Right.
It's always when somebody is symptomatic enough. Well, that was actually last summer. So here we are, 8 months down the road, and now it's in my head, like, oh my gosh, he just rolled his eyeballs at me. Is this because he's got that one spot, and
Frontal lobe.
yeah, well, he's got a hot spot here and a cold spot there,
Right. It's not
or is it
connected.
just? So now I'm all in my own head about it,
Yeah.
and I just think I'm grateful for what you're doing, because parents out there in our current world, where I do think that there is a lot of teenage pathology. We essentially have a culture that waits until it's bad enough, and then we go to the doctor.
Mm.
And we have a medical culture that tends to do medicines or pharmaceuticals first because it's easy, it's cheap, and I get it. It's easy
Yeah.
and cheap. But if parents can be aware that there are options that likely help them get more to the roots. It's always plural. I
Hmm.
don't, it frustrates me if people say, well, you got to get to the root cause. I mean, it's always roots, but and especially if you've got a teenager mind that also wants to step in with some leadership, some self-direction
Hmm.
that doesn't come across as, well, the parent is telling you to do this and that and turn your phone off and all the stuff. But that is really hard, and it's a process. It's, they are also teenagers and learning and growing. It's not, well, I don't know. I would go and I would kind of say, what is your perspective on young people when it comes to the discipline of doing a heart math, of doing self-directed moments like that? Do you find them, and let's say they're not the ones that are super already symptomatic, but so more along the lines of, I just want to be better. Do you find them receptive?
No. Yeah, I
I'm so
totally
glad you
agree.
said that,
Yeah.
because I was getting nervous.
Yeah, no. Yeah, the ones that it works really well on and are ready for it are desperate for
Yeah.
something to work for them to make them feel better or different.
Yep.
And
I
and
agree.
it does, it helps them, but it is sad that we as a culture just assume like we have to be in this really bad place to get help.
Yeah.
And we don't go before knowing that like if we could choose something before, a struggle or a trauma would come to have the tools to get through it healthy, it would be very different in that way of having the ability to take care of ourselves in a way where we aren't taken out physically after it and emotionally. Um, yeah, it's going to be hard. Takes a toll on your body, and like your stress is going to take a toll on your body, and then you're going to start feeling awful anyways. So, yes, no,
It's
I totally agree with it's mostly out of desperation and the fact that they want a choice. It is all about agency and
Yeah,
control.
that we joke about it all the time, and probably the same is true for you too in your own business, that the main thing that helps people to click or call is pain and desperation.
Yep.
And it's really hard to sell pain and desperation. People don't want to buy that.
No.
And so we have to put it out there in a different light. And that's part of what a podcast like this would be about, is rather than waiting for XYZ pain and desperation, on the front side, can somebody be, dare we say, wise enough or mature enough or inspired enough to want to become a better version of themselves?
Mhm.
Some people, yeah.
Mhm.
And okay, to those who are ready to hear that, and culturally, that just doesn't happen to be the average American teenager.
Mhm.
And I get it. We were one of those at some point. I'm sure I would have been the same. So I think, for to bring it back around, the where I find I'm most comfortable in the teenager, if they're all like, if they come in and the pain and desperation is there, I'm very confident we can help them get going in the right direction with many tools, including heart math and neurofeedback and the molecules of biochemistry. There's many routes. But to those who aren't quite there, I think that the invitation is towards inspiration.
Mm.
What kind of brain do you want to build, rather than saying, oh, we need better increased access to care and how do we treat anxiety? I'd say, no, that's the wrong approach, because ultimately it just creates a society of anxiety. And
Yes.
that's exactly what we're
Right.
doing. But the better approach would be, okay, how do you as an individual want to build what you call peace and
Mm.
content and purpose? That is where, if you've got a teenager that's not desperate enough, then it's like, who are you building?
Mhm.
And that, for the most part, it's kind of cool to watch them go through that and process these things on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. I think asking them that question is key. It's communication, right? It's
Yeah.
helping them discover who they want to be because you're curious and want to know them and help them know themselves. And so we kind of talked about factors of like, exercise, the neurofeedback, and things outside of the medications. What do you think, like nutritionally? I know this is so hard because they just go for the junk food. They go for
Yeah.
they go for anything that is going to be easy and taste good. But I know for me as a mom, I make sure they get their vitamins because I know it helps them. It helps counteract if they're going to eat something horrible, it at least helps them a little bit. What would you suggest, or like, nutritionally supplements and like on the daily things that we could help them and implement into their maybe diet and daily routines?
That's a good, because that is actionable. It's very doable.
Mhm.
And so what we kind of did was when they're young, be bossy. Like this is what we're having. And then once they were traveling for sports teams and stuff like that, they're stopping at the gas station. And then once they're driving, it's like, okay, don't try to be bossy.
Mhm.
But what we did say is dinner's dinner, and unless there's some odd special whatever, we're having it at home. And sure, you get some influence on what's your favorite and those kind of things, but dinner is dinner. So there's
Mhm.
at least that. And until COVID, so COVID then turned into free school lunch,
Right.
free for everybody. Because I had said before that, well, if you want to eat, yeah, we got the food here. I've already bought it. I'm not going to pay
Right.
for it again over there. You can take it with you. Well, then it came free. So, so that was a problem with our kids. And by then they were in high school and whatever. So, and then the other thing was we said, if you're going to have breakfast, you got to take the time to make it. You can't just walk out. And granted, we don't have Pop Tarts in the house, but
Right.
an easy bar of whatever. So that's where we said, hey, you get to fast. So we kind of clamped in on the dinner and lunch. Do the best you can. And I agree. Is it worth the time, the money, the effort to mitigate with some supplements? And I would just say, well, when we have those students in that are that age and we do the labs, it's almost always insufficient or deficient down four kind of main areas. And so the ones that I would say without knowing anybody, and if you live up here at altitude or, it's a sunny state, but it's cold most of the time. So put some vitamin D in there.
Yeah.
And if they're post adolescent, K2D3, we feel very comfortable saying 1 to 2,000 units per day. Just, you don't even have to do your labs or whatever, just take it.
Yeah.
Secondly, and so that's based on environment, right?
Yeah.
Like we've measured it, we know that's there. Secondly, most American, or at least every American that I talk to in the office, will say no if I ask them, how much fermented food do you eat? So that the second one I would put in there for almost everybody is a probiotic.
Mhm.
And then, what kind and how much, and we can debate about all of that kind of stuff forever, but get a good one. And then number three, if you ask, well, how much fish do you eat? And they say, oh, I eat fish all the time, once a week. So when we measure those kind of things, they're almost always low.
Yeah.
And I'd probably put those, like each one of those is related to your brain, to
Yep.
your attitude, to your self. Like we know that this is brain food that's all interrelated. So some of this, the anxious generation and all of the things that are going on out there is deficiency
Mhm.
in those areas. So I would lean in on those. And then maybe if they're willing to take it, a good multivitamin, sure.
Yeah.
But, most people think of 4 things to take per day as a lot. And I'd say, oh, maybe. But I would reverse that back to say, the deficiencies in America are a lot.
Mhm.
And our diets don't tend to be great. We've measured these things. We know averagely they're low. So those 4 are what I would recommend, just that, all the way down to once they're done breastfeeding, if they're going to be in the normal American household where we don't eat sardines very often, teach them how to, do the fish oil.
Yeah.
My favorite story just happened last week, and this was one, she was, I don't know, 4 or something like that, and had some whatever issues. And I said, well, just, plop out the sardines. And the mom was funny. She was like, I'll show this doctor. She opened up this can of sardines, plopped it out there. Her daughter loved them, asked for sardines every day. I'm like, see,
Oh my gosh. I don't think I've even tried a sardine.
well, right, like it has a persona in
Right.
America, but if you go to natural grocers, get the sardines in water, let somebody else get it out of the can for you, right? Because it looks kind of nasty in the can. If you make tuna salad, if you dress it up with, some really good mayonnaise, some mustard, some relish, and all
Hmm.
that, you won't be able to tell the difference.
Oh, okay.
And the product is better than doing canned tuna.
Oh,
So those kind of things are the ones that we could talk all day long about,
right.
the methodology and the path and all of those kind of things. But
Yeah.
I would lean on those 4 supplements. I think that's a pretty fair thing. And then there's 100 more. I read about quercetin. I read about curcumin. I read about whatever. And yeah, without going down the rabbit hole of each of those things, and especially where you've got kids, they don't want to take pills.
Yeah.
I would say magnesium would be the next one.
Oh, yeah.
You
Hmm.
know, brain health, body health, those kind of things. It was a big deal in our family. If
Yes.
they didn't do their magnesium, they're cramping on the soccer field all the time.
Yeah.
It's part of the menstrual cycle issue. So I'd probably put that one a very close next.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can do drinks that are decently dissolvable with the magnesium.
Yep, the electrolyte drinks.
Yeah, I'm really curious about all that because I don't think like we're busy American families. And so to choose to make healthy dinners is really hard. And for, teenagers that are driving and making their own decisions, have their own money, they stop at fast food. And they
Yeah,
get home and they're like, I'm not hungry because I just ate that. And it's like, but I have dinner. Like, I have dinner for
yeah,
you. And trying to get them, I guess in my head, what I've tried to do is encourage them to be healthy. Like being healthy. And what does that mean? Like you get to choose, but what
yeah.
does it look like to be healthy? What are
I
those choices?
agree. If they have a mindset of I want to be healthy,
Yeah.
let them decide what does that
Right.
mean. Let them decide, tonight socially, my friends, whatever, yep, I had XYZ fast food, but tomorrow, and then we're into compromise, inspiration, negotiation,
Yes.
all
Yes.
all of the tricks.
Yeah.
It through my lens and as a parent, and we are in that spot. I have gone out of my way to tell them I'm in the struggle too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like quick
Yeah.
and easy, taste good, convenient. I remember and oh my gosh. So our high school had open lunch, so 5 days a week. My well-balanced diet was rotating the fast food joints, for 3 years. And so it was hard won, but it is possible to learn that you can like Brussels sprouts, that you can like these other things. But really, when that started changing was when I decided to make it myself and figure out how to do it. And of course, then I'm in my late 30s. And so I think it comes with, like you say, communication, grace,
Yeah.
invitation into a better pathway.
Yeah. I think we talked about a lot today and I so
Well, I'm getting
appreciate.
hungry. That's
Yeah.
perfect
We
timing.
need go get some dinner. I so appreciate your just holistic worldview of it is mind, body, and spirit of who you are, who a child is, who we are as parents. Nobody's perfect. And there's a lot of grace, mercy, commonalities of movement for every family. And I think there's a lot of comparison sometimes between, well, they're doing this, so should I do that?
Yeah.
Or like seeing stuff on the internet, like you said.
Yeah.
Is this going to work for us? And grabbing at things.
We are in the internet bred the super mom, super cuisine and all of whatever that is. And it put yet another layer of pressure on the way to be.
Yes.
What you just said, though, if if communication is there, if grace is there, if invitation is there,
Hmm.
I, I can't imagine that this child is gonna, be as bad as they could have would have been.
Right.
They're not going to be perfect. There's going to be pathology. We all live in these human bodies. But if you're inviting them into a mature and wise adult understanding of how to think about that, I think that's kind of has to be in that context.
Yeah, especially at this age, I think they feel more respected if
Yeah.
you have the conversation and let them have choice. And then they surprise you like going, I need to eat more vegetables, you know?
It only took 19 years
Yes.
and we still got some work to do, I'm sure. But
At least he's
yeah,
not 30, you know? Like you got to look at the timeline.
that's right. He's doing way better than I never would have said those words as a freshman.
Right.
So it was
Yeah.
a proud papa moment, right? Like,
Good. All the years of trying, and you're a
that's
doctor.
that's right. I mean, we've really been doing the stuff, right? Like
Yes.
and we still are a family of our own version of pathology.
Are. We're made unique by God. It's everybody's
I,
different. Everybody's
I was
made
going to say,
differently.
thank God for grace.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I so appreciate you being with me and all your knowledge and sharing it with us.
Thank you. It's been fun. Till the next
Yeah.
time.